Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. My name is Maya Chen, and at 43, I've discovered something most people learn too late, that silence, wielded at precisely the right moment, can shake foundations louder than any scream ever could. I've spent the better part of 2 decades in operations, quietly stitching together the seams of things that were unraveling before anyone else even noticed the threads coming loose. But Today, I'm going to let something fall completely apart. The company-wide meeting starts at 9 o'clock sharp. My laptop screen fills with more than 100 tiny faces, each one wearing that practiced corporate smile we've all perfected over endless video calls. Outside my window, morning light spills across the Charleston harbor, cutting through my blinds and painting golden stripes across the wall behind me. I keep my camera switched off, my microphone muted, my fingers resting quietly on the folded letters sitting beside my keyboard. At 9:14, Blake Hartfield begins his presentation. Oh, his voice is all polish and corporate buzzwords, the kind that sounds so impressive in the moment until you step back and realize they mean absolutely nothing at all. "We are streamlining operations," he announces with practiced confidence, "outsourcing non-essential functions to achieve greater scalability and organizational agility." My project, my team, 5 years of careful work, of late nights and early mornings reduced to a single bullet point on his slide deck. I reach forward and unmute my microphone. "Blake, you might want to revisit section..." Soft click. The icon turns red again. I've been muted. For half a second, I just freeze there, staring at that red icon. Then the old calm returns, that particular steadiness that only comes from surviving a dozen storms that no one else even saw coming. I switch on my camera. The gallery view stutters slightly as new faces look up, confused, wondering why someone's turning their camera on in the middle of Blake's grand speech. I lift my right hand slowly, deliberately, holding up my company security badge so everyone can see it clearly. In my left hand, a single page, my resignation letter, signed and dated just this morning. Behind me, my virtual background fades in, stark white letters against pure black. Effective 9:01 a.m. The silence that follows is instant and electric, like the moment right before lightning strikes. Blake blinks hard, that confident smile of his folding in on itself like wet paper. Somewhere in one of those tiny squares, someone's coffee mug clatters against a desk. The general counsel, Tom, leans forward suddenly, eyes narrowing as he stares at his screen from some unseen corner of the grid. Then a voice cuts through the void, older, strained, carrying the weight of someone who's just realized everything is about to change. The founder. "Tell me she didn't just quit." My cursor hovers over the Leave Meeting button. The digital clock in the corner of my monitor flips to 9:01. Click. The grid of faces vanishes instantly. The screen goes dark, except for my own reflections staring back at me from the black glass. Steady breathing, clear eyes. Finally free. Outside, seagulls wheel above the harbor, their cries thin and distant against the constant hum of Charleston morning traffic. I close the laptop with careful precision, set my security badge beside the resignation letter, and walk to the window. I push it open and the morning air rushes in, salt and freedom and possibility. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story until the very end. And let me know which city you're listening from. I want to see just how far my story has traveled. 3 weeks ago, I still believed that loyalty meant safety, that dedication would be rewarded, that doing everything right would protect me. Charleston was still sleeping when I logged in that morning. The harbor outside my window held that pewter gray color that comes just before true dawn. The air carried salt and the faint rhythmic hiss of the tide, a steadiness far more reliable than any meeting calendar had ever been. At 5:30 in the morning, I was already on my second mug of black coffee, headset balanced against my neck, listening to yet another escalation call that had started somewhere in Frankfurt and ended, as they always did, at my doorstep. 5 years. That's how long I'd been the silent hinge keeping our biggest logistics client from completely falling apart. They trusted me because I never panicked, never blamed anyone, never let a single contractual clause slip through unnoticed. The numbers told the story. $15 million in annual revenue, 0 missed deadlines, perfect stability. Stability doesn't make headlines, but oh, it makes payroll. I'd built an entire life around that stability. Morning jogs along East Bay Street, a quiet apartment filled with post-it notes and seashells collected from weekend beach walks, a rhythm that let me believe, truly believe, that I was safe. But lately, the air in the office had changed. The founder had stepped back from daily operations. A new generation was redefining what they called efficiency. They spoke endlessly of speed, disruption, automation, beautiful, shiny words that broke everything if you looked at them too closely. Emails arrived with subject lines like transformation sprint and next-gen workflow alignment. None of them, not a single one, mentioned actual people. When meetings doubled and context disappeared, I started hearing the same phrase whispered in corridors and break rooms: "We're going lean." Drop a comment if you've ever felt your company changing around you and not in a good way. The first time I saw the draft proposal, my stomach twisted into knots. Offshore task forces, compressed review cycles, eliminated oversight positions. The client would never agree to this, never. I flagged every risk, attached the relevant contractual clause, typed out a careful explanation, and hit send. No reply. It was subtle at first, the way they started cutting me out. One calendar invite quietly removed here, one email thread I suddenly wasn't copied on there. But I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before in smaller, quieter ways. Years ago, when women who'd built the foundation were politely erased once the paint dried and the building looked finished. That morning, as dawn finally peeled back across the harbor, I sat back in my chair and watched the water catch fire with early light. Somewhere in the building above me, someone was already preparing a slide deck about my obsolete processes, about how we needed to modernize and optimize. I just didn't know his name yet, but I was about to learn it. He arrived on a Monday morning. The kind of man who genuinely believed charisma could replace actual competence. Blake Hartfield, 32 years old, fresh from a startup that had folded spectacularly before its first audit, now wearing a vice president title like it came with some kind of divine right. I met him in the hallway outside the operations floor, and I'll never forget that first impression. He was balancing an oat milk latte in one hand and a cablet in the other, smiling like he already owned not just the building, but the entire city block. "You must be Maya," he said brightly, offering me a handshake so quick it didn't mean anything at all. "I've heard you're basically the spine of this account. Cannot wait to modernize what you've built here." Modernize. The word just hung there in the air between us, polished and harmless sounding until you really looked at what it did to budgets and people. By the end of that first week, he'd renamed our internal communication channels to things like Velocity Hub and Ops Reimagined. He replaced our shared folder system, the one that actually worked, with some shiny new offshore workflow tool that absolutely none of us had tested or requested. The first major outage happened within 48 hours. Documents disappeared mid-transfer, version histories completely reset. My entire team just sat there staring at their screens, waiting for instructions, trying not to panic. I fixed it myself, quietly, patching access routes and manually restoring files before the client noticed anything was wrong. Blake called it teething pains. I called it negligence. He didn't read reports, only slide decks, colored boxes and arrows pointing toward words like synergy and scalability. He used acronyms nobody recognized, then congratulated himself for leading us into the future. When I tried to flag compliance issues, he smiled at me as if I were quaint, charming even, a sweet relic of slower, simpler times. At first, I said nothing. Let him rearrange the furniture, rename all the functions, reinvent the wheel in lowercase letters and bullet points. My job was to keep the machine running smoothly, and sometimes the very best way to teach a man like that is to let him pull his own plug. Still, there was something deeply unsettling about his ease, the way his last name seemed to open doors before he even knocked. When I overheard someone mention that his father played golf with the founder every single Friday morning, the whole pattern snapped into sharp focus. This wasn't leadership, this was inheritance dressed up as innovation. Have you ever worked with someone who got their position because of who they knew, not what they knew? Tell me in the comments. 2 nights later, I stayed in the office long after the lights on the 5th floor had gone dark. The building had that particular hollow stillness of a place that only truly breathes when people are watching. My computer screen was the only light left, its glow reflected in the glass walls that suddenly felt less like modern design and more like a cage. Blake had circulated another optimization memo that afternoon. Charts, projections, a detailed plan to outsource half of my team to Manila within the quarter. I needed proof it would backfire. Hard proof. I opened the client archive and started scrolling through folders with names like contract amendments and continuity addendums. The files dated back to the pandemic years, when the entire world was being held together with duct tape and desperate prayer, when everyone was just improvising survival. I remembered those days too well. Tanya Rodriguez, the client's head of risk management, running daily emergency calls from her kitchen table, her kids visible in the background. Both of us trying desperately to hold this massive account steady while the whole globe unraveled around us. And then I saw it. Executed Contract 2020 Revision C.pdf. The document loaded slowly on my screen, line by painful line, until my cursor stopped dead on section 6.4.4b. Continuity of named personnel. If Maya Chen, the named escalation officer, voluntarily resigns from employment, the client reserves the right to terminate this agreement immediately and without penalty. For a long, breathless moment, I didn't move, couldn't move. My name sat right there in 12-point font, plain and absolute. I'd helped draft that clause myself, years ago, at Tanya's insistence. "You're our stability," she'd said back then, exhausted and overwhelmed. "If you go, this whole deal goes with you." I hadn't thought about it in years. Now I understood exactly what it meant. All those meetings Blake had excluded me from, all the system migrations he'd pushed through without proper review, none of it mattered. None of it. The entire structure was built on my presence. If I walked, the contract fell with me. The hum of the building seemed to deepen around me, air vents sighing like something slowly exhaling. I scrolled again, rereading those words until they felt like a heartbeat pulsing in my ears. Then I saved a fresh copy to my personal drive, carefully timestamped, completely unedited. I closed my laptop gently, as if trying not to wake a sleeping animal, and leaned back in my chair. Somewhere far below me, the night security guard's footsteps echoed across the marble lobby floor. He was locking up for the night, and soon, so would I. The quarterly all-hands meeting always felt like theater. Slides rehearsed, smiles pre-approved, applause cued right on schedule. That particular morning, I joined the video call from my office, the harbor glowing behind me like liquid glass in the morning sun. My report was third on the agenda: client health metrics, delivery performance, escalation response times. The numbers were good. Better than good, actually. I'd kept that account running at 98% compliance, despite all the chaos Blake liked to call innovation. When my name flashed on the screen, I unmuted my microphone. "Good morning, everyone. I'll start with our Q2 stability indicators." Blake's voice sliced right through mine. Actually, Maya, he said, his tone coded in something sweet and sharp at the same time. Let me jump in here for context. He leaned closer to his camera, flashing that practiced grin he'd perfected like a signature move. As part of our new efficiency strategy, we've decided to transition her project to our offshore team next quarter. He paused, smiling even wider, the kind of pause that practically begs for applause. A few executives nodded politely in their little squares. I blinked, genuinely unsure if I'd heard him correctly. My project? I asked, before realizing my microphone light had turned red again. Muted. My own frozen face stared back at me from the screen, mouth half open like some kind of absurd screenshot. I moved my cursor to the unmute button, but the option was disabled, grayed out. Someone, Blake obviously, had taken away my ability to speak. He just kept talking, words like streamline and modernize floating over my enforced silence like nothing had happened. The general counsel, Tom, appeared suddenly in the corner of the grid, his expression tightening. His eyes flicked toward the founder square, camera off, just initials displaying. I sat perfectly still, years and years of professional composure compressed into a single heartbeat. My hand found the edge of my desk, steadying myself as I clicked out of presentation mode. The room around me went so quiet I could actually hear the buzz of the ceiling lights. I didn't try to interrupt again. There was absolutely no point fighting a man who thought muting someone made him powerful. When the meeting finally ended, I closed my laptop with surgical precision, and for the first time in my entire career, I didn't feel defeated. I felt something colder, cleaner, something like a plan hardening behind my ribs, cooling into shape like molten glass. If someone publicly silenced you like that, how would you respond? Comment below. 2 days after that meeting, HR called me in. Their email was dressed in all those soft corporate words: touch base, alignment discussion, transition support, the kind of language that tries desperately to sound neutral while quietly gutting your entire world. I walked into that glass conference room at 9 o'clock sharp, coffee in hand, pulse perfectly steady. Dana, the HR manager, sat waiting with a folder she clearly didn't feel comfortable holding. She looked like someone about to deliver bad news she didn't write. Maya, she began, smiling too tightly, I just wanted to clarify some next steps after the reorganization. This isn't personal, you understand. It's part of a larger strategic vision. By mid-week, the rumor had escaped containment. Someone in legal had stumbled across my uploaded file, and within a single day, quiet whispers began threading through the entire office like electricity through water. Clause 6.4.4b. 3 numbers and a single letter that suddenly carried the weight of the world. Conversations stopped dead when I entered a room. Chat windows went abruptly still, like everyone had collectively decided to hold their breath whenever I walked past. I kept working as if absolutely nothing had changed. Reviewed deliverables, approved invoices, answered client questions with my usual thoroughness. My name still appeared on every single escalation ticket, and every one of those tickets reminded me, and everyone watching, just how deeply I was woven into the very fabric Blake was trying so desperately to unravel. Tom, the general counsel, passed me in the hallway one afternoon. His glance lingered for half a beat too long, sharp and knowing, but he said nothing at all. Neither did I. Some truths don't need witnesses, they only need time. Have you ever held information that could change everything? How did it feel? That night, I wrote my resignation letter by hand. Not because it was required, nobody writes resignations by hand anymore, but something about ink on paper felt irreversible in a way typing never could. The strokes were steady, deliberate, the words spare and clean, no anger, no justification, just simple closure. On my kitchen counter, I placed my security badge beside it. The silver numbers glinted under the warm overhead light, catching reflections like tiny mirrors. Then I opened my laptop and created a new virtual background, white text against pure black, stark and final. Effective 9:01. I tested it once, watching those letters hover behind my reflection in the screen. They looked almost elegant, like an epitaph carved into something calm and certain. Thursday night slipped into Friday before I even realized I hadn't slept at all. The harbor outside my window shimmered with early morning light, that particular quality that comes just before true sunrise. The same water that had reflected countless mornings of obligation now looked strangely still, like it understood what was about to end. At 8:57, I logged into the company's video conference link. 100 faces appeared instantly, cameras blinking awake like tired eyes. I stayed muted, completely motionless, just another dark square in the grid. The clock in the corner of my screen advanced. 8:59. 8:59. My cursor hovered over the camera button. Then, without a word, without any warning at all, I turned it on. The all-hands meeting began at exactly 9 o'clock. Blake appeared first, perfect suit, perfect grin, pretending not to notice the tension simmering through every single pixel on that screen. "Morning, team," he said brightly, like he was hosting a game show. "We've made incredible strides in optimizing our delivery pipelines. This quarter truly marks the beginning of a leaner, smarter operation." Slack absolutely exploded. Dozens of messages flooding in, half disbelief, half pure panic, all of it happening faster than anyone could possibly process. By mid-afternoon, legal had confirmed what everyone suddenly feared. The clause was valid, binding, enforceable. At 6:12 that evening, the client's formal notice arrived like a guillotine blade. Activation of Section 6.4.4b, immediate contract termination, no penalties assessed. $15 million disappeared in one single sentence. By the next morning, the story had leaked beyond our company walls. Someone had screenshotted my virtual background, and "they muted the named person" started trending across industry message boards before noon even hit. Investors called emergency sessions. Board members demanded answers. Blake's name appeared in message chains alongside phrases like liability exposure and executive review pending. And somewhere in all that chaos, my old office mug still sat on my empty desk, the words "Queen of Ops" catching the morning light like a quiet punchline to a joke only I understood. By Monday morning, the entire company looked like a building after an earthquake, still standing, sure, but nothing aligned where it used to be. The pending merger, once flaunted as absolutely inevitable, was suddenly under serious reconsideration. Board members demanded emergency sessions that stretched late into the night. Half the leadership team went completely silent on internal channels, while the rest filled inboxes with half-hearted reassurances that nobody believed for a second. I watched it all unfold from the safe distance of my small Charleston apartment, the harbor fog curling past my windows like smoke from a slow, burning fire. News traveled fast in corporate circles. That leaked screenshot of my resignation background had become shorthand for total implosion. Effective 9:01 a.m. 3 simple words that turned into a headline, then a cautionary tale, then a full-blown case study. By noon that Monday, legal issued a formal statement to the board. The language was clinical, professional, but the subtext cut like a razor. Section 6.4.4b was valid, binding, and repeatedly ignored. This wasn't an unfortunate accident, this was arrogance. Within hours, Blake's access badge was deactivated. A terse message circulated internally. Vice President of Operations suspended pending review. His name vanished from the organizational chart before the end of that business day. The founder released a carefully worded memo calling the loss an unfortunate alignment failure. Investors called it negligence. Employees called it exactly what it was: karma, itemized and delivered. Justice served cold. Ever witness someone get exactly what they deserved? I received 31 emails in less than 2 days. Job offers, consulting invitations, a few awkward congratulations from people who'd once avoided eye contact with me in the break room. I answered none of them. Not yet. Late one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was Tom, the general counsel. His voice carried the particular weight of someone who'd spent far too many hours in boardrooms cleaning up other people's catastrophic choices. "I just wanted to say," he began, quietly, almost gently, "you reminded them that contracts have consequences, real ones." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of distant traffic filled the space between our words like breathing. Then he added, softer now, "I hope you find somewhere that actually deserves you, Maya." When the call ended, I stared at my phone's dark screen for a long, long time. The sun was dipping low over the water outside, staining everything in shades of gold and amber and promise. And for the first time in years, maybe my entire adult life, I didn't feel like I was desperately holding something together with nothing but willpower and caffeine. Just silence and possibility. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from something you built to save yourself? And if you've dealt with something similar, please share your story. You're not alone in this. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go. 3 weeks later, the rhythm of my days had completely transformed. No dashboards glowing at me in the dark, no red alert emails screaming at dawn, no more holding my breath through meetings that should have been emails. I started consulting for a small logistics firm housed in a beautiful weathered brick building right by the Charleston waterfront. The floors creaked authentically when you walked, and the conference table was actually an old shipping crate that someone had polished smooth with age and care. There was no corporate mission statement painted across the lobby wall, no empty slogans about velocity or disruption plastered everywhere. Just people who listened before they spoke. My first morning there, the air smelled gloriously of sea salt and fresh coffee. The harbor outside shimmered with early sunlight, seagulls swooping low over sailboat masts, their calls echoing across the water. I unpacked slowly, mindfully, a leather notebook, a good pen, a small ceramic vase I'd carried carefully from my apartment. The quiet here was different, not the anxious, holding your breath silence of corporate politics, but the kind